Can you hear me now? Wow, cool. Uh, Please excuse for this small delay. My name is Sergey Shishlapin. I'm a Sitecore developer, and today I'm pleased to join you and talk about unit testing gotchas. So let's get started. A few words about me. So I'm a Sitecore developer since quite old times. I started with Sitecore 5.3, I guess, 1, back in 2007. Yeah. I even got some certification for 5.3. I have never seen the certificates, but I do have them. I was told. I am Sitecore Technology MVP, and I am author of Sitecore FakeDB framework. So actually, yeah, and I'm a big TDD fan, so that's why actually I'm talking here today. What are we going to talking about? After this session, I'm going to discuss things that prevents developers from doing test-driven development, from writing unit tests, and I think I've got a list of interesting topics we can discuss, and you can get something useful from here. You will know how to get benefits from doing test-driven development. By the way, who's writing unit tests here? I mean, not here, not now, but in general. Okay, not so many people. What about rest? Is it too complex, or why don't you write unit tests? It's time consuming. Yeah, I expected this. It's, in my opinion, one of the most common reasons not to do that. Okay, and yeah, so I hope you will be able to improve your existing tests after this session. So, yeah, you may ask me, who are you and why are you going to talk about this stuff? We know so many reasons not to do unit testing, and why do we need to listen to you actually and change something? So, yeah, as I mentioned, I started in 2007, and we had quite interesting processes at those time. There were no any words we know now, like continuous integration, pair programming, test-driven development, nothing like that. We had like 2 independent teams for development and QA. QA were separated. They were sitting in another room, and we delivered changes via Sitecore packages manually once a week. And actually half, or maybe half, or 30% of issues were just reopened because it was working on developer's machine, and when we tried to install and reproduce it, it was actually not fixed. And then my team lead decided to change something, and we tried to introduce some first kind of tests. Who knows what is this? Is there any person in this room who knows what is this? Yeah, have you tried it? So yeah, so the first tests, they were called unit tests, but actually they were not. So they were running in web runner, in web page, which somewhere in parameters specified some assembly name or test class name to execute. Do you know the reason why it was working this way? Sitecore was really coupled to HTTP context. And if you try to use kernel just in unit tests, it was just failing because somewhere inside Sitecore it was HTTP context current. Oh, there were no current at those times. And web page helped to initialize like a web request with HTTP context. So we've got some opportunity to run API, and so to make Sitecore API not falling immediately in our tests. So why do you need to start doing unit tests? So so usually what people say is the idea is to get less bugs, right? Frequent releases, best quality, simplify learning curve, documentation. I don't know if somebody else can add something to this. It's just something that, I don't know, first. So if you search for unit tests, that is what you will definitely find in numerous pages, courses, etc. But actually, that is not something which is really most important thing to me. So it's like nice things. You may want to introduce it, but that is not the main part, main piece of functionality or piece of main feature I want you to know. So what prevents developers from writing unit tests? As you mentioned, it can be timing, right? So we often don't have time, and no quality guarantee, hard to write and maintain. So timing, any idea how to address that? Yes, but do you really need that? Yeah. Test source, yes, it's an excellent approach. We will try that a bit later. Timing. Yes, so usually we are fighting these fires that appears, and we don't have time to write tests. Or I also often hear phrase that managers do not allow us to write unit tests. Have you ever said this phrase? Or have you ever asked managers if you're allowed to write unit tests? Clients do not allow us. But the question is, why do they ask clients for permission? Do they need to do that? But what would happen if you not writing unit tests? Nothing. Sorry? Yeah, you have to test it manually. And what about, I don't know, releases, regression? Have to test manually again, so it can impact the release cycle, right? It will. Nice. Okay. So quality. So one of the reasons I often hear about unit testing is that it does not guarantee quality, and I don't know if it should actually. Should it? So, but no, I mean, I often hear that it's like an expectation that unit tests should guarantee quality. So if somebody starts doing unit testing, or if somebody is going to invest some time into doing unit testing, he expects a better quality as a result of his investment. But I don't really see a dependency between this stuff. I mean, if you talk about this first approach, so quality might appear later, but it shouldn't. So there is no guarantee that if you start doing unit testing, you will receive it for free, like immediately. So, and again, there will be bugs. So nobody is saying that if you start doing unit testing, all the bugs are solved, and there will be no issues with the product. So it's unit testing is a little bit about some different thing, and the most important for me, what I discovered, is that this safety net. Have you ever heard this term before? No? Okay, so I will try to explain. So actually, safety net. So that is the main reason, and yeah, not quality, but this safety net should help to introduce this to improve quality. So safety net means that you should not afraid of breaking something. So unit tests should prevent you from breaking your code, and as a result of that, if you manage to build the safety net, you should improve. So the amount of bugs should be reduced, and in order to build the safety net, what should you do? You should write the test first. So test first means that you never fix any bug until you have a test, and result of that is high coverage. We'll talk about that. So safety net. Yeah, please let me explain a little bit about this one. Yesterday I suddenly received a pull request for FakeDB. I haven't released it for last maybe 6 months. I don't know. I don't often use this framework now, and suddenly I received a pull request, and it was in this pull request it was like more than 100 files changed. So it's hard to figure out. Maybe it might be hard to figure out what was changed, and if it's still releasable, if it still works. So safety net is it something that allows me to release this product. I just run all the tests, it passed, and that's it. I just released it, and it was possible only because I'm doing this test first approach, and it's like a small chance to introduce some regression, to introduce some new issues. It happens sometimes, but not so often. And yeah, that is some print screen from FakeDB. So high coverage is like 95%, but again, it wasn't goal. I never aimed to reach this. It's just the result of the test first approach. And because of that, I managed to release it like almost immediately, just in, I don't know, a few hours after I received this pull request. So code coverage, as I mentioned, it's not really a goal, because sometimes it's it can be easily, so it can hide real issues. So have you ever seen tool like Encrunch? Does anybody know what the tool is? Encrunch? No? I will show you. So that is a tool which helps to do unit testing, and this tool shows code coverage. I will show it in a few minutes, and it's very easy to be fooled by this tool. So it can show something like it's covered. In fact, it won't be covered. So it may introduce some issues. Yeah, and one important note about safety net is that you should never remove a test. So removing a test, you should, I don't know, argue about that. It should not be like easy to do. So you should do some effort in order to allow yourself to delete a test. And it will guarantee that your safety net will work. Complexity. So unit testing in Sitecore might be complex. Before, it was because of the HTTP context. Any other issues somebody can mention? Database. What's wrong with the database? Yes, it needs to be there. Yeah. So now with Sitecore 8.2 and later, it's abstract. But anyway, even with abstractions, you still need to use static classes sometimes. I saw it a lot in MVC and other use when just old static classes are used. And I would like to show you some example of the code. It's just some recent piece of functionality I implemented. So imagine there is some field, and this field contain value in some special format. It's so in this domain model, it's called merge tag. So it's some v number and some text, and it's just a value stored in a field. And sometimes this value needs to be changed. So according to scenario, sometimes I need only v1, or sometimes I need only test value, sometimes I need both. And it's stored in a field. And what is important is this v number needs to be mapped to another Sitecore item, and I need to build reference between two items. I need to link them so that in the link database, two items are linked. And it may look complex. So that is, if you can see, it's a custom field with validate links method. And in order to build this reference, I need to do a few steps that are really hard to unit test. So I need to get database. I need to find some other item, execute some query. And then I need to read this so-called merge tags, match them to the item. And finally, in the last line, I need to build this link between two items. So I will just switch to Visual Studio and I will show you this example live. Just a second. Okay, it's duplicated, right? So that is this method, and can you see it? You can see it, right? Can you see these green dots in the left side? I don't know if screen shows it. Okay, nice. So this green dots, it's tool called Encrunch which runs this code, and green dots means that it's covered by some tests. I can show you this test. They're here. And what Encrunch does, it runs tests immediately. So if I change some code, just in a few seconds, it will run tests. And something fail. something fail here. So I created this method, and it's quite complex because, yeah, you need to read item, you need to read another item, link them together, build a link in the link database. And if we go to the tests, you may see that I have only two of them. And does anybody know what is the problem with this? Is there any problem at all? Yes, exactly. So there are too many conditions. You are absolutely right. So too many things may go wrong. And in order to cover all these numerous scenarios, what I need to do, I need to copy this quite complex test multiple times. And this stuff leads to the problem that it will be hard to maintain this class. For instance, if it's quite easy to change if I need, quite easy to verify if I want to change the query, right? Because it's already mocked in the database. But what if these rules in the merge tag format change? Remember this line when I have this v1 letter? If the format change, it might be quite hard to test, because right here I have this format. I will just try to increase the font. Can you see it better now? So I have this field value, and it contains format like that. And if I change it, if I add something, if I remove one bracket, it may fail, and I may need to create way too many tests like that. So the idea is that in order to cover the scenarios, I need to separate it into smaller tests. So what I have here is this field value. I have read merge tag code. I have method. And if I go here, there will be a lot of some string manipulations. So very easy to break something, very easy to lose something. And as you can see, it's there are some gaps, so it's not fully covered. And in order to test all these scenarios, I have to deal with such a huge test. I need to mock this database, configure field, etc. So that is what complex, that is what takes time, and makes this test easy to fail. So it would be much better and much easier to work with if this logic is just moved to another class. Another class, something like merge tag code, this one. So I can just move it. I have already done that here in my field. Here. Just a second, I'll show you. Yeah, so here it is. So that is the same logic, which manipulates all this string stuff, but you can see now it's covered. And in order to test it, so the test looks much easier. I can now check all the different combinations and check how it will behave if I have some malformed data, malformed field value. etc. So it's extremely cheap. I mean, you don't need to create this hard tests and all this Sitecore stuff. So you can do that, you need to do it, but you need to do it once in order to test the high level scenario that everything works together. And all the rest, all the small pieces, they just needs to be separated and moved into independent tests, simple tests that are very easy to maintain and support. And what's here? So instead of calling this read match tag code method, which is not covered, I can just replace it with something like the following. This one. So here you can see that tests are still green, but now my big method, it calls some other piece of code which is well covered and can be easily extended and modified. And the same I can do with, for instance, this piece, because right now you can see that in the field I store serialized merge value, the string, and in order to deserialize I need to cover two scenarios. I need to, if there are some values, I receive some collection, and if there are not, I can receive null. And in order to not to fail with null reference exception, I need to return empty collection. And right now, in order to cover these scenarios, here I would again need to create two tests, huge tests, complex tests like this. And in order not to do that, I can just introduce this class, another independent class. I created some helper, some JSON field with again this simple one-liner. But again, if you take a look on the tests, all the tests for these two scenarios, they are simple. I have just very few tests covering this part. And yeah, it's easier to maintain them. And the same is valid to this part. So here I just merged two collections, trying to find what is common between them, and build the result link. So here I introduced, instead of trying to test this logic in the field test, I created class called campaign merge tag list, moved this code here, and again with tests I can test this simple class only. Test became smaller. In order to test that I can read an item, I just need to mock database and item, and this piece is quite small. Okay, guys, sorry, do you covering? Do you follow in this part? Any questions so far? Yeah, yes. So dependency injection. So about dependency injection, here, if I for instance want to deal with JSON, I don't want to inject something here. What I want to do is to write something like that. JSON field deserialize. So I don't want to inject this JSON field stuff. I just want deserialize list of this, and I need to pass something inside. Yeah, something like that. So it's less code. It's covered independently, and I don't need to inject it, right? And the same can be valid for. So sometimes I may need to inject something, but sometimes not. Merge tag code. So I don't really know if it really makes sense to inject it. Can it change? Yeah, so yes. So, and this part, I can make it smaller as well. So what I need to do is to write something like, and now I should be able to remove all this stuff till somewhere here, and I just call new method get some, this one. So you see, now this method became smaller. All these tests are still green, and here I've got this method with all this stuff, which is better covered with with tests of the smaller size. So that is the idea, to reduce amount of lines here. And about dependency injection, probably, so for now I don't really see, so in some scenarios it might be needed, but here it seems I would just maybe keep it like this until it's really needed to be injected. And with dependency injection, another problem might be, for instance, that is a Sitecore field, and it can be a little bit problematic to inject something in here because we don't control how it's created. But the main idea from here is that it's hard. So if something is really hard to test, so you should not. Sometimes you don't need to fight Sitecore and introduce tests like that, or even a bigger site, and then come up to the conclusion that it's way too complex and it's impossible to unit test. So this huge test is just an indication that something can be wrong here. And what you need to do is to try to maybe decompose or decouple it into smaller pieces that can be easily tested, like in these scenarios, because in these tests, if you take a look, you need to write much less code. And if, for instance, at some point I decide to change format, it should be not V1, but I don't know, Z1, I will need to deal only with this method, or with something which is like a smaller than the original piece. Oh, sorry. Yep. Это сейчас один экран. Yeah, and I want to get back. Do you have any questions regarding this? Not yet. Okay. So I have few more tips I would like to share. So that is a so that is the idea with these smaller tests. And what you could notice with this tool in Crunch is that actually this is this is some poster that I printed a few years ago, and it was on the wall in our room. So the idea was to stop debugging. Again, the tests I just shown you, if you notice, they run quite fast. So it's just milliseconds. It takes milliseconds to run them. And you don't need, for instance, when you work with this formatting, with these brackets and V numbers, etc., when you work with this formatting, you don't need to copy assembly to Sitecore instance every time and wait until it's loaded. It will just eat time significantly. And the idea with this stop debug statement is that you just should think and use right tool and write the proper tests in order to gain this benefit from this extremely fast execution. Yeah, so that is it. Like today's test, you can see just 1 second. So yeah, there are very few of them, just 17, but it costs almost nothing to run them. They're very fast. On other projects, I have like 1,000 tests, and it takes about 10 seconds to run them, really fast. And one more important issue. Actually, yeah, I had two posters. The second one was about stop context. That is something which you could also have seen in numerous places. When somewhere deeply inside some API, you can see some context database, context item, context site, which is not clear how to deal with. So actually it is possible, you probably know this, when you can use some database switcher or item switcher, but the dependency is inside, you cannot see it from the class contract, and you need to somehow figure out that it is inside and it needs to be fixed. And actually I even those code, I found this on the Habitat, on the Helix description pages, that the dependency should be clear everywhere in the solution. So instead of using context database, context item, it needs to be injected. As I shown in this class, I just injected it in the you see this campaign merge tag. So it might be the same database as context when this code works. But for testing purposes, it's easier just to inject what I want, what I need, and use this code. So it should reduce some, again, errors. And yeah, so what I want to say, don't be afraid to experiment with this stuff. It's good. And use right tools. So that is like my list, my list of must-have tools. It's XUnit, ReSharper, and Crunch, the tool that runs tests continuously. Thank you. Any questions?
What is the key difference in compared to an unit runner in Visual Studio? Why I need Crunch?
So there are a few differences. In Unit Runner, can it run tests immediately? I guess the latest, no, yeah. And within Crunch, you see what it does. It just runs it all the time. So I put one symbol, you see, it just runs all the tests continuously. And it's smart enough to choose to run the most like impacted tests first. So you receive very fast, you have fast feedback about your changes in the code. And if I recall correctly, this tool should be able to run it either on save, so it became better. Sorry, I don't remember. But the idea is that it can run it, and it also shows some code metrics if you are interested in that. So if you go to InCrunch, you can see metrics. It may show, oh, I created this simple solution. It has like 88% code coverage. So you can just find some gaps. You can use this tool for that. Unfortunately, it's commercial, but it really worth this money. So I've been using it for years since it was free in beta back in, I don't know, 2011 or 12. Now it costs some money. You need to buy a license for a year, but it's worth it. Yeah.
My question about unit testing in general. Let's imagine situations that I have a class with some protected method.
Sorry, could you please?
With some protected method,
Yeah.
which should be crafted by unit tests. Is it a good approach to inherit my test class from this testable class just to
Expose it.
yeah.
So it's one of the way to do that. Yes, quite legal. But you need to be careful with that, because if you have too many protected methods, when you say inherit, do you mean inherit and open it to make it public, right?
No.
No, inherit and what? Sorry.
It's called protected methods within things.
Base class can hold.
Yeah, yeah, hold from base class.
Make it available from unit test code.
So to make it available, you mean to change it from protected to public, or?
No. We inherit that class, and that is why we can access that method code. That is the main why we do it. So we don't change protected to public.
Ah, okay. And sorry, what?
Then we can access this and dot protected method name.
Okay. And what's the question?
Is it good to do that?
Yeah, because I read that this approach is not recommended to use, but I don't know other ways or reasons. Yeah, why not? Maybe you can suggest some
Different approach.
yeah.
So the question is, Is it good or bad to inherit from class? So
Test class inherit my test class from
test class inherits your system under test, right? Your main class you're going to test. And okay. I have never tried that. Why would you need to do that? Why do you need to access the protected method? It's to test protected. Yeah. So why not? Yes. So you're going to test some like a abstract class, right? You want to inherit tests from it in order to be able to call its protected methods. Why not? Yeah. Interesting idea. Usually, I in this situation, I just created another class which is inherited in order to get an instance of the protected class, and I opened protected. Yeah, probably yeah. Why not? Yes. Question? Yeah. And Crunch can be installed on CI server, but I don't really know why would you want to do that. So you have TeamSeed or any other tool, you just run tests using either some embedded task or XUnit in unit console. So you need both. So in Crunch, it's just for development machine. It's just for you as for developer to receive this immediate feedback, and you use it here. But CI server is something different, and it should run tests as well. Again, yes. Yeah, you need two ways to run tests on your local machine with Crunch and on your CI with any tool that works for you. Yeah. So you probably you just don't need it, right? Because it's pure tests, it's pure XUnit or in-unit tests. You can run it on CI without Crunch, and you should just do it. So why would you need to pay for Crunch license on your CI server if you can just run your tests using console application or this run test task in VSTS, for instance?
But also you can have a situation, for example, when you just will skip this step and just will commit your changes without any testing, right? So that's possible. And on test environment you will have fail bill.
Yeah, you have fail bill. Excellent. That is why you have CI.
And do you have any possibility to integrate this and Crunch right on in Octopus or in TeamCity? Can you run all these tests there?
It is possible, but I don't see any reason for doing that, because on Octopus you can just run XUnit console for free, right? You don't need to pay $300 for Crunch. You can just run your tests without Crunch. It is possible to do it with Crunch, but there is no any reason for that. Crunch shines when it's on your machine. It doesn't need to be on CI.
So Crunch doesn't really provide some APIs to like XUnit. It just
It's a runner. Just test runner. So there is some API and there are some Crunch attributes, but again, I have never used it because it would add a dependency to some commercial assembly. No need for that. It just, so these tests that I run with Crunch, you see, I also can run them with default Visual Studio Test Runner. I can run them with ReSharper, with XUnit console, so numerous ways. And Crunch just makes it a little bit better. Any other? Yeah.
Have you tried live tests of Visual Studio 2017?
It's available in enterprise version, right? No, I haven't tried. I have not. I haven't got this license. Yes, the idea is the same, but I never tried, so I just love this tool.
It works even better. Maybe Visual Studio Ultimate or Enterprise shows the exact piece of code, even if it is a long line, let's say, yeah. And
Mhm.
orange will show you the green circle,
Mhm.
yeah. Visual Studio will show you the exact piece of code.
Wow, cool.
And even more, I haven't tried. However, I know that the Visual Studio have the possibility to generate tests automatically for the pieces of code.
To generate tests for code? No, 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 no. So I would write tests first. Okay, guys. Any other questions? No. So thank you for your time.
Okay, guys, let's get started. Okay, my name is Peter Nazarov. I'm Sitecore development consultant. I worked with Sitecore for about 6 years now, and today I'd like to share with you something that I learned from my experience, how we can capture technical specifications in some easy way and start the development very quickly. Well, why do we need software? It could be different reasons. You may need to scale out, you may need to grow your business, you may need to replace your old software, by the way. And multiple businesses, they are trying to achieve some typical business problems. And I'd like to ask you, maybe you know some examples. Can be, yes.
If you are outsourcing, then you will be pressure involved by your end client asking for time reports and all that stuff. Maybe it's not document flow. Makes sense.
Maybe. Any more?
Well, again, you do hundreds of millions invoices per hour. You won't do that without automation.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Exactly. And this is what we need to do, but why do we need to do this? For example, if you need to issue a lot of invoices, why would you do that? Yes, to an extent, yes, but the reason why do you issuing the invoices? Apparently it's just to get someone billed and get payments back to you, so to get your money. So if you don't issue those invoices, you're not going to get them paid. That's the main issue. And if you have so many without software, you cannot do it. You cannot operate. However, what kind of information do we need to capture in order to start developing software system? We need something. We need some agreement about the behavior of the software before we can start development, right? Can we capture it somehow in a simple way? I think we can, and I'd just like to share with you an option how you can do this. And it will just take you several steps. And the entry level for this approach is very, very low, and the people with pretty much no understanding of how software development is working can also do that and can understand it. So first of all, you start with capturing user journeys. This approach is very natural to business because business normally knows what they expect their customers to do. As part of this approach, so you identify the persona. So for example, my customer comes to the site and is looking for a specific product. Let's say they want to buy some running shoes. And they try to see what kind of running shoes we have, and they explore and they find their size, they add it to cart, they complete the checkout and buying a product. So, and the business outcome for my business is that customer purchased the product. This is just one example of the user journeys. It could be many. Maybe sometimes we just want to, just like as marketers do, they use conversion rates. So for example, when you just subscribe for newsletter and give your consent for GDPR, that all can be a business goals that you would like to get on your site, for example, if it's website. and like user registration and so on. It's all the user journeys with the specific business goals. So it's very easy for business people to start describing these user journeys in identifying the personas and the actual business goals. And by identifying actual business goals, you know why do you do this software, and it's very important because that will prove the investment in the software. And also you capturing all the behavior of your system overall. And this is just the starting point. It seems like simple, but we already will gain lots of information from business people who are actually not technical, just by collecting user journeys. And as an outcome of this step, we'll just have lots of user journeys which you want to execute on your site. And this will describe the complete scope of behavior of your software system. The benefits of this in terms of Sitecore, that can then convert user journeys and use them to set up our engagement plans, goals, personas, profile cards, and also do classification for the content. In addition, at the end, when we'll be ready to release, we know the scenarios of the user journeys that we need to execute, and we can design our end-to-end testing strategy based on the information we collected at the first initial step. So we know how to verify that we implemented the right thing at the end. Second, we know the user journey, we know where the person starts on the site, we know what the person does, you know what actually the final goal is and where that happens during the user journey. So now you're ready to identify actual web pages that you expect your customer to visit in order to execute the user journeys which you identified in the previous step. As the outcome, you will get, probably you'll see that, for example, I'm going on a homepage, then I may read some articles that promote my products. I can use some product catalog page to see the product pages to buy the products, and so on. I can log in and so on and so on and so on. You can identify actual pages of the site and just capture them pretty much like a bullet point list. It's very simple. However, it's, if you just do this, it will be a little bit difficult to build the actual software. Then you need to think, what are my SEO requirements? What should be the URL structure for each page? It is important, because if your ranking in Google are not good, so you cannot do good online business, or even online presence. So for example, I have specifically highlighted article. You can see that the article URL is just article/article. In Sitecore, that wouldn't work so easily. You have to do something, because you store articles under the articles section, and then but the thing, your article URL requirement is has to be from the root of the site, just article 1, for example. And this is something that you need to capture. You need this information because developers need to do something about it to implement the URL structure you need. And then the third step, now you know the structure of your site, so your tree view, which you can do, for example, in Sitecore. And you know your URL structures. And now you can go to every single page and analyze what do you have on each page, what kind of elements you have, in order to make this page function. What you need to think about is basically what are the elements of your page. It normally has logo, global search box, links, navigation. It will have some content. For example, this is a page which is a home page, and we know that the page has specific structure, has these specific elements. We call them components. So you identify those. I would definitely recommend you to always start using a grid. So you see the grid behind. It's normally 12 columns. And always think how your components are aligned on the grid. And before you go to desktop, think of mobile first. And do both. And then do the desktop. Once you have this, or for example, you described what are the main elements in the homepage, you don't need to think about designs. Designs will come later on. As an outcome of analyzing your site structure, which you identified on the previous step, you now see the templates. So the template that describe the pages are based on, and it also says which components are used on each template. However, we know that this is something that is not very clear, maybe to non-technical people, but all pages, they have to follow specific layout. And looking at our templates on the previous step, we can clearly see that there are several layouts on the different templates, and on some templates it looks that the layout is actually exactly the same. So we just identify those. By the way, I would recommend you to number your elements, number your templates, and number your layouts and all other parts of the site, because that will help you to refer to them in the code when you talk between developers. That is easy, nice thing to have. And what I like to add, if you captured a number against specific thing, and then you need to delete that thing. So for example, you said, are we going to have a layout? And then we decide, no, we're actually not going to use it. Don't ever assign the same number to anything else. So these are literally incremental IDs which should be mutable, because you may have significant problems with your code and so on if you use or even you start talking about these things. So that's the step number 4. On step number 5, what we need to do specifically for Sitecore development, we can identify partial designs if you use, for example, SXA, or just general sub-layouts. What they can look like, for example, we have header and footer, and that will be some presets that always use the same set of components. And it's also always think about mobile and desktop. As you see, the responsive behavior of the header is not very straightforward, so you need to mind that, and it's important to know that. And the last, you are identifying actual components. You already identified them, but the thing is, now you need to a little bit describe them more, what they do, and what are the elements of the components themselves. This step is something that you probably need more technical people involved, because you need to capture some details, and also these details need to be verified by technical people to make sure that you can actually do this in this way. With this specific platform, they will be platform specific, like Sitecore. This is, for example, logo. I would recommend you to always do it on the grid, because that will help you to also understand how it behaves and how it fits into the page, and how the responsive design is done. You can use just simple wireframes like on the slide. If at this stage you can also get designers involved, you can do together with designers, and you can annotate your designs instead of just the wireframes. If you can. If you cannot have designers at this stage, you can just use simple wireframes. That will be faster. Just say, this is an image. Just use a simple annotation table, like a name. You name the element. You can use this name later to name your field on your template in Sitecore. You specify the CMS type. This is important, because if someone would say, okay, this is now I say it's a single line text. They'll say, oh wow, it's different. So it's an image, but it's single line text. Why is that? Oh, because we actually for logo, it's a recommendation that we should be using SVG instead of image. And why not to code SVG as text? Because we have this element in HTML. So let's capture this information. So yes, it has to be SVG, but moreover, maybe our SEO requirements or usability requirements or accessibility requirements guide us to use SVGs for the logo. And why not to capture this information if we already know this? Let's do that. I think, for example, you also need to have something like nodes and maybe some more columns if you like. You can extend this table to your needs. You need to describe the behavior, what this component is doing. So I'm explicitly explaining here because sometimes when you say image and then you say type single line text, it would be good also to explain why is that. So you clearly say explicitly that this in CMS we store logo and as SVG text. And also we know that the HTML tag will be SVG. And of course we need to add, if there is any interaction with the element, we need to describe it. So here we say on click, redirects to the home page. That's what logo component does. It's very simple. And pretty much last but not least is Datasource. You can imagine that there is pretty much no any software system today that just works on its own and always integrates with something else. And the data that is coming to your pages or to your components, it's not necessarily always coming from a single source like Sitecore, the CMS. It could be coming from CRM, it could be coming from other third-party APIs and so on. And you will, at some point, face some components that have a mixed data sources. So something is coming from CRM, something is coming from Sitecore. And it's but the thing is, when you at this stage, you probably can get people involved who knows where this data should come from because they know their internal systems already. And it's very good idea just to add this column, make sure that this information is captured. So if you expect this to be just editable in Sitecore, just say it's a Sitecore. When you say that, also if there are some options how this data can be stored on or how this data can be retrieved, also add this because, for example, logo, I don't want to store logo on every single page item. I like to store my logo, for example, on a site item, so it's only stored on one item. And then you get the data source from there. Of course, you sometimes need to, if you have more elements, it makes sense to specify whether this element is mandatory or not. So that when you can implement your validation rules in CMS accordingly. If you have more complicated validation rules, you should probably add some kind of behavioral validation into nodes column or even introduce additional column called validation and describe your rules there. A little bit more complicated example, it's a component which we identified is called promo teaser. It has heading and then subheading, heading text and the CTA. So we do pretty much the same. If we have an image, it would be always good to say what size of the image we expect. That helps a lot. And yes, it actually depends on design, but this is something that you need to agree before you start the development because otherwise if you try to change sizes later, that may cause problems and it will help a lot front-enders to structure their code and style the site. Other things, we always mention the tag, element tag, HTML element, because that helps you to align with the front-end team and back-end team, because sometimes front-end team may implement something in a way that they may have to change in order to work it with Sitecore nicely. And when you as a Sitecore developer look at the spec and you see that, oh, somebody suggested that to be, I don't know, like a div or a span or H3, and that, for example, may cause some problems in Sitecore, and you can just spot this straight away up front and discuss it and maybe align it and specify it in a compatible way with Sitecore. Another example is number 3, which is promo teaser subtitle text, and it's specified as multi-line text. You know, in Experience Editor, you can go and edit inline, and you can sometimes on multi-line text fields, you can hit enter to add line breaks. It is important to specify this thing because those line breaks, of course, will not be rendered outside Experience Editor when the page is in preview mode or normal mode, unless you style it accordingly in CSS. So it's important information that you need to capture. for front-enders not to forget to style it accordingly. And as you see in the current example, we say that the source is data source item, and we have 2 fields optional, and we have 2 fields mandatory. What is also good, specifically if you work with multilingual sites, specify whether the field is versioned or whether the field is shared. That's language specific. And once we finish with our components, we get the list of components of the site, and we have our partial designs or sub-layouts, we have our page layouts and templates. We have the scope of parts that we need to implement technically in Sitecore in order to complete the business goal and deliver the site. Now, it's pretty simple. You just need to design. For example, if you use Agile or specifically Scrum for your development, you just decide which parts you pick up for the first sprint, and you kick off. And then you just put this as tickets to your physical board or any virtual board you can have in any software. So what I just talked about today is just simple approach that allows you to start development quickly. And it does not require any much technical knowledge, specifically from business people, to start implementation phase, because what I've seen from my experience, it takes very long time, sometimes for the business, to start implementation of software, because they're struggling to capture the information that is required for software developers to build the software. And I hope that what I shared with you will help, and also may help some businesses as well. I hope this was recorded. So thank you for your attention. Any questions?
So, question number 1. I noticed in your presentation you were using a naming convention for components. So, if you can say much more about that naming convention, because I think you missed it out. While it's very important, and I know that from working on the same project with you once in the past. So, can you open up why is it important?
Honestly, it depends. I personally think it's important. But what I can tell you, if your team everybody feels that it's just an overhead that nobody likes, don't do it. It's more about the team spirit and the happiness of the people in the team. The thing is, this numbering, it's all specific problem. So when you start calling like a promo teaser and promo teaser, and you have 2 promo teasers, and like when I start conversation with someone about promo teaser, everybody not very sure which promo teaser I'm talking about, because we have 5 promo teasers. And then I talk to someone who is from marketing department, and they say, yeah, it's my, we'll just use that promotion component. I say, yeah, but there are 5 of them. I say, really? Yeah, there are 5 of them, yeah, and they're all different in terms of implementation. And they say, oh, why there are 5 of them? And this conversation just goes to the wrong direction. And if we at least can have technical conversation when you say, okay, this is promo teaser C01. Okay, and everybody now knows what C01 means. C01 means because we actually described it, and we have a wireframe. It's very visual. Everyone's seen that, and we also know how teaser C01 is different from teaser C07, because we know that. We also what I recommend you also try to name the components differently. Just don't make sure you don't have the same things, because the naming convention that you put here, you should aim to use in your code. So when, for example, I see this spec and I want to find something in the code, I can easily find it, and the name should match. You may also decide to use the IDs inside your code, but be very careful. We're not going to cover this topic today because it's very complicated. Of course, you cannot name your classes like C01 and so on. Yeah, it's a bad idea. But sometimes, like CSS classes, you may consider using these kind of things there because that helps. Also understanding the markup and also understand the boundary of the components. For example, you say the div box is the start of the component boundary. It may have like component or C01 and with name of the component, you can use this class on the main component. Again, you need to discuss it with your team and see whether it's working for you. But it may help.
It's also a good idea to put those IDs because you may refer to the documentation articles.
Correct.
It's really cool to find it.
Yes. It's correct.
Personally, for me, having C011 in class names in CSS isn't good. It's not bad.
Yes. And if you, the thing is, this spec will give you documentation for your software, and then your software, when it's done or released for the first time, you do an evolution or you do a support of your software. And people that come to do it in time probably will be different people who build the system. What they do have an access, they have access to the code and they have access to the spec. And to finding the parts that correspond to the spec in the code is not easy. And this numbering will definitely help you. You can just find in files for the number and you find all the parts related to the component.
The benefits are clear, but what, just in your assumption, what would be the cost of doing all that stuff, the documentation, because describing every component for, let's say, average 100-page website. Of course, they're all reusable, but
I think the more complex this site and the more enterprise your company is, the better it's documented, more formal it is better. If you have something that you need to build in 1 month, this is maybe not something that you want to spend time on because in your budget you still need to write code, and if you spend all your time doing comprehensive documentation, you probably won't be able to code because your times will be gone by that time. Yes?
So across the presentation, you suggest what has to be identified, what has to be done. So the question is, who has to do it? Within the company, the implementation partner, the client side, what is the minimum team that can do this? And what is the best case scenario for the requirements and things like this?
Okay. So the question is, who should be involved in the process, and I think at which stage, because there are a few stages of the process. Regardless, that is more or less simple. First of all, the whole process describes a transition when business people handing over their business problem and their business goals to technical people, and that is actually enables this transition, this approach. And on the beginning, on the step 1, when you just analyze user journeys, the main people who should be involved are business people. It could be marketers or business owners, the people who know what their business do and what they are trying to achieve and why. Of course, after the user journeys are captured and before actually they finish, they need someone technical to ensure that what they captured is aligned with the way how software works. In this stage, you can have like a solution architect or like a senior developer, but someone technical should be helping you. And then at every single next stage, you of course need to have technical people involved, because when you identify pages or the site structure, the business think, oh, my site structure may be like this. And if there a technical person is in the room, they always can say, yes, but the thing is, it would be, in software perspective, it's not going to work very well and it will cost you a lot and you need to change this and this. Would this work for you? Yes. Okay, let's agree on this. And that really helps. And then when we start talking about the layouts, how the page is laid out, how responsiveness is working, business will normally start be very concerned. Okay, this is how its system works, but how does it look like? They will start be concerning about design. So at this stage, you will need to have also UX designer and UI designer involved in the process to define the actual behavior and interaction design. And once we come to the last stage, when we specify the behavior of the components, of course, you need UX designer need to verify it, and you need to have front-end and back-end people involved to review what's been specified and how it was assumed that software was going to work, because it may not be easy to implement or may not be compatible with the technology you do or the platform you use.
When do you do this reviews? Before this sprint begins?
That's the ways of working, but I think if you want to just get to the point that you can start development quicker, you shouldn't really bother much about framework. Of course, you can use Agile, you can use Scrum, you can use Lean, or you can use whatever. You can just talk to people, and as long as you produce the results, it's fine. But if you like Agile, of course, you can just do it by iteration. So you looked into one template, 2 pages. You analyzed them. You identified how they're going to look like, how they're going to respond. You identify your layouts, you identify your partial designs, you identify your components, and now you just take another 2 templates and do another iteration. However, by that time, maybe you can start doing some development, but there is a risk always doing this, unless you understand the full scope, because by the time you get to the last template, the business may realize, no, this doesn't work, and this should be on the template which we analyze first, and we need to amend this now. And if it's been already built by that time, you will have to pay for this again. Yeah, so you need to mind this. So of course you can do it. It may potentially allow you to speed up the development, but it may cost you more. So you need to consider this.
And on what stage your the estimations are made?
Estimations are really not part of this specific process. Estimations, if we, for example, as I propose, if you like to use Scrum, you have a sprint planning, and then you decide how long will it take. Or if you like put everything to the backlog, you can do the backlog refinement and just put the story points or hours, whatever you like, and estimate it. So this is just to get to a point when you have enough technical information to start development or understand what you're technically doing. And once you get this information, you can, of course, do technical estimation at any time when you think it's necessary.
So based on your experience, what is the minimum team that should be available at the partner side and the client side to handle, let's say, 1,000 hours project?
1,000 hours.
Project.
1,000 hour. You know, it really depends on complexity, to be honest. It's, and also, what is your timeline for the project? How long?
Minimum team.
Minimum.
Do you believe that developer can write the spec?
You need good experience to write the spec, because when you write a spec, you take an ownership of design of the system. You basically identify how the system is going to be designed and built. So you need to have a good experience. So you cannot be like a junior developer to describe this. For complex software, if it's like you build like one-page website, maybe you can. But the minimum team, you mean development team?
Partner side and client side.
Client side.
Because very often you can hardly find the right person at the client side to solve your particular question or address particular problem. So what are the people that should be at the client side at minimum to get the project going?
Normally send your own business analyst to client side.
It really depends. It really depends on the client. I definitely can tell you, because it could be just one person who understands all the business and what business needs, and that person really wants to be part of your a part of your team and understand what you guys are doing every day. Or sometimes the business is really focusing on the business and they consider a software just as something that they're buying. And they just say, we need this, and they want to forget about this and just only know when this is ready. So there isn't actually no answer to this question. So who should be exactly? Well, it should be a person who can give you enough information about what are the requirements of the system, what are the behavior, and what are the business goals they try to achieve. So if you have any business questions, so they can give you an answer. It could be one person, it could be multiple people, it could be marketing, it could be analysts, it could be business owner, or it could be like a hired business analyst that you just put on a client side, or just a scrum master or product owner just who can go and work with them and help. Yes, go ahead. Yes.
You should take this into account and put this restriction. Or even worse, if you have multiple tenants, and you should restrict this for site level, yeah? Or write maybe related queries or things like that. How you are covering such things, or and maybe you are not covering at this stage, maybe on the development stage. In which way?
It's more, you're talking basically more about capturing some important architectural aspects of the system, and so by doing this you are defining design of the system and you're defining the system architecture, sometimes implicitly, but still you do that. And all these important things, like about if you have like a context of multiple tenants and the way how you restrict the editing and so on, you always add it to the corresponding part, and the all functional parts that you described, they're normally components. And so you annotate the corresponding element of the component and just say, my logo image is only editable in this way and is stored in this specific way, like on a site root or just on a tenant root, whatever. And you just specify that explicitly, because the thing is, if this information is important and you know it already at this stage as a developer, you just add it. So for example, if business tells you, I just want a component which just displays an image, text, and the button, then developer just comes, okay, so what is the component name? If we call it like this, is it okay with you? You need to check it, because when the client receives the final system and they try to use it like an experience editor, and they say, who was naming this? Because we would never ever think of such a name for our business thing, what developers produce. That's why you need to ask and make sure that the names that you use here for the fields and for the components is something that makes sense to the actual business that needs to use this software.
That requires a lot of communication. You have to be really
Yes, and sometimes, very often, you are not in the same room with the client, because you cannot find, even if you are in the same building, you may not be able to find time when you can go to one room together and spend time. That will be more efficient, by the way. But if you capture this and put it, for example, in the Confluence, so marketing people or everybody who's going to use this, they can go just and review what you specify, and you tell them what you actually see here, it's exactly what you're going to see in the system, and make sure that the naming convention that we use is something you're happy about. And they can easily just go and scan, okay, they say, oh, we don't understand, I don't know, HTML tags, we don't care, but we do understand name, yeah? So, and it's simple, they just check it. If you just say, it's like, they say, oh, no, we definitely don't use, or we call this like this. Can you please rename this? Because for them it may be very important. They may even want you to rebuild it and pay for the whole work again, sometimes just to change the name because it's so important for them.
Is it a big deal to change just display name? Because as far as I know, all cases just crazy, like item names we make expensive in Sitecore.
This is a very good question. No, it's not hard to change display name, but Yes, it's more about using agreeing on the business language and the terminology that you use, because when you start discussing things, and some people who are involved in the same product development name one thing with one word, and other people name with another word, and some others with a third one, you'll just get a chaos and you stop understanding each other. So that's why you better align up front.
Another question, how do you struggle from your experience with the content, with the experience editor frustration that I think nearly every content editor from client side has when he sees the experience editor for the first time, because it usually differs, right? It is different to what exactly is going on the front page and what is in the experience editor. And is it defined somehow, or from your experience, what do you?
I think the question is about the discrepancy, how your page looked on the actual site and how the page appearance may change in the edit mode when you allow to edit content. I think on simple components they will look pretty much identical, but some more complicated scenarios like maybe carousel or something else, or like you maybe add like to add some anchor tags and do in-page navigation, somehow manage it and these kind of things, and you want to expose it, also be editable in line sometimes. There are different solutions, and yes, so sometimes the expectations when people buy Sitecore just say you can actually open the same page and just click on everything and edit. And it doesn't really look exactly like this, and doesn't really work exactly like this. And so what you really may do, I think that if you work with sprints and you do a demo after every sprint and just use the client feedback and just say, look, we did this for you, but the thing, you have to edit it like this, because closing the gap and make it be very in line, it's not supported by Sitecore, because this is a complicated functionality that we customly built for you. And you'll have to, in order to make just this thing work instead differently like this as you want, instead of like it's working now, which is not very handy, or maybe not look very nice, fantastically like you wanted, it will cost you that much. Do you see value in this investment? And then they make a decision.
May I answer the previous question?
Yeah.
The answer is training, just training, don't worry. So normally when I've worked, in my experience, Sitecore is being used by very much and very well money paid organizations who have plenty of money, and you treat customer as something solid, but it never happens because staff always jumping from one position to another, or just leaving company or new people. So showing them things at the sprint time is good for proper stakeholders from client side. But normally when, imagine you are doing some newspaper website, so there should be proper editors who will be working with that on day-to-day basis. So you need to have some formal training on the client side to show these people and potentially every new person coming inside how to work with your page. And then basically at that stage you explain all the nuances of experience editor, but yes, they also look with big eyes for the first time.
Yeah, the first time, I mean, the first time frustration or first time surprise when they see the experience, but
Yeah.
trainings, yeah, that's totally.
But there's another important aspect which you need to always mind. I think, you know, if you can anticipate any frustrations, or you can foresee something which may make someone, specifically client, a little bit unhappy or frustrated, you need to set an expectation upfront. What's the result going to be like? And if the expectation is set, then frustration actually not happening. You expect that is fine. I think we have another presentation, right? Yeah. So I think we need to finish now.
One last question: any literature you can recommend regarding this topic?
I honestly never seen it covered anywhere.
Not Sitecore specific, but just something like I don't know, general.
I think it depends on your personal interest. So if you can chat with me afterwards, I can maybe advise you something. Cool. Thank you.
вчера хватило.
Интернет.
scale it because like commerce server is just some services, and you need to install some applications on your laptop, like Windows applications, for manipulate with catalogs, inventory sets, profiles, etc., etc. Also, we had performance and accessibility challenges, because the other issue was that sometimes when you try to get the right products from the service, so we had timeout exceptions, some did blocks, etc., etc. Difficult setup. When I tried to start Sitecore Commerce A2 version, so spent about 3-4 weeks to install it just on developer machine. So it's really was difficult. The other exception was and no any documentation how we can resolve them, etc. Problems with automated deployment. So it was difficult to automate it somehow, only in case that you can just export any catalogs and just push to the services and apply it. Because some services we need to configure right in the machines, etc., etc. And was not any support for Microsoft Azure. What's new? Currently you can install our Sitecore Commerce 9 on Windows Server 2016, Windows 10, and Windows 8.1. Uses .NET, last .NET framework, SQL Server 2016 SP1. Also, we can use Azure SQL, ASP.NET Core. Currently, all the engine right now was implemented on ASP.NET Core. And as you know, so it's compatible only with Sitecore 9 version, and Sitecore 9 version uses Solr 662 or Azure Search. What's new? So completely removal of legacy commerce server products. So no any commerce server. So for example, if previous version of Sitecore Commerce we still used commerce server just for storing any catalogs, inventories, profiles. Currently, all this stuff was moved to ASP.NET Core services. Also, Sitecore announced a new business tool engine to manipulate with some entities like with merchandising, catalog, inventories, catalog, pricing, books, promotion books, orders, customers. In previous version, it was like just a part of Sitecore. Sitecore was built on Speak, and currently it's just a separate service based on Angular 4. You can easily extend it if you want to add some new I don't know any UI controls and see some of your custom data for content editor, for example. The next thing which was released is just a new storefront. Sitecore for all in all releases released also just storefront. Storefront is a standard, I can say how to say, just a standard site where e-commerce shop with some basic functionality, including search, some product details page, category page, cart functionality, checkout process, also out of the box supports integration with brand new payment, gateway, etc. So basically, you can just install storefront and try to play with it. New catalog, inventory, and customer subsystem also was released. Before we manage all this stuff right in commerce server, right now Sitecore in business tool creates some UI companies, UI page, or display all this information. But
there you can just select this Sitecore and install from scratch in short time. Also, you can redefine some configurations there, so it's also cool. The main thing that for now, I think we don't have any problems with deployments. Before, Sitecore provided the documentation, for example, if you want to install something, you need to do there are a lot of steps manually. For now, we just Sitecore provides some PowerShell scripts, for SIF installation framework. So where you can just define your configurations, set some, I don't know, credentials, any passes to the zip files which we need to install, especially for Sitecore Commerce, define any credentials for payment, gateway, and all this stuff will be patched to the installation script, and you will just install it in one button solution. So it's also good. Also, if you need to customize something or change or for example, add some new configurations there, you can use Sitecore scripts which Sitecore team provides and modify them like as you want. So as I already mentioned, currently Solar is a default search engine. Before it was a Lucene. With Lucene on my project based on which was based on Sitecore Commerce 8.1, we used Lucene, and we had some problems with indirect synchronization. So on different CX environments, we had some different type of documents, count them, etc., etc. For now, it's just Solar, so it's also good. What was interesting from development perspective? So for now, for example, it's take about 5 hours for setup Sitecore experience cameras from scratch. So also install configure Solar, install Sitecore 9, etc., and just fill all configuration files, and it's just for local development machine. One more thing that for now Sitecore just provide documentation how we can set up it only on dev environment. If you need to scale some roles, you need to you need to find any part of scripts from the Sitecore and just move them and build your own installation script for separate roles. Yes. Not any details how we can start to different instances of Sitecore on the same machine, because in Sitecore installation scripts there are a lot of hard-coded values, and I think in short time, maybe in the next release, we'll have it more flexible, and we can do that. From my experience, better to keep if you will start to work with Sitecore Commerce, better to keep it right on virtual machine, because it's pretty easy to set up just one machine, and this machine you can just share between other developers, and they can save time for environment setup. For example, for me, it took for example, what we did, we just we had a project, we migrated project from Sitecore 8 to Sitecore 9, configured, installed new Sitecore 9 on virtual machine, also installed all the stuff like SQL Server, Solar, some features, and also configured Sitecore Commerce 9 there, and it took 2 days. So it's also great. So for example, before I spent three more weeks for setup. As an alternative, Sitecore community created Packer for Sitecore, because this repository contains Packer templates for local Sitecore hosting environment with IIS and SQL Server on Windows, Solar, and Sitecore 9. Building virtual
for VirtualBox. So it's also a quick way how you can run Sitecore commerce for development, for example. What Sitecore provides, together with some packages with some basic Sitecore items, some separate commerce roles, Sitecore provides BusyFix SDK. BusyFix SDK is like a business tool, site, which you can change, you can update with if you know Angular 4, you can create some new pages components, write some logic, and you can extend it. And then the server SDK, the same situation. The core provides it also, start from update 1, or maybe if I'm wrong, I don't remember. Maybe it also was in initial release, I don't remember. So using that server, you can customize your authentication, federation authentication. Of course, the core provides some version of commerce, like for example, commerce server used exported catalogs with in XML format. But for now, for example, Sitecore uses JSON format, like a one zip archive, which includes there are a lot of JSON files. And for implement this feature before, we need to, or I don't know, parse. We need to parse XML file, or we just can create any block inside WooCommerce, any controller, which will send some requests to the Sitecore to commerce server services and grab all this information there. Also was no any versioning, editing, publishing, and workflow stuff. Ability to extend catalog schema from business tools I mentioned, delete any entity, catalog migration, and import-export tool, because you can do it only with Postman request only. Ability to support multiple sites within a given domain means you couldn't have two different shops with the same host name. And there was no any marketing automation support. New release of new update was Sitecore Commerce 9 update 2 was about 2-3 weeks ago. What's new in this release? So it's an entity composer. If, for example, before we couldn't add some properties to the products, currently we can do that. So we can do it right from business tool. It's also great for me. So it's very also flexible. For now, it supports. You can define few types of property like string, data, offset, decimal, integer, and boolean. And also, you can add another one property like a Dropbox with predefined values. This plugin versioning has been also improved to provide versionable entities. Currently, in new update 2, you can create new versions of your entities. So you can create them for any kind of catalog, for product, for category, for product product variant, etc. But one more thing, you couldn't change anything in previous version. So if you will create a new one version, if it was published with more like with apply to, you couldn't change it anymore. So if you want to change something, you need to create a new version, and you can edit this version and publish it. Also, Sitecore integrated a new simple workflow. So with a few steps, like in draft, you can submit it and waiting for approval, and we can reject. Also, we can approve, and it will be have approved state. Also, in this case, Sitecore provides some roles who can do that, but unfortunately, no any comments we can add when we will go from this state to state. So for me, it's also a great feature because there are a lot of clients ask about that. Now we have some reports in experience analytics and experience profile. So if you will go to, if you will have a contact, you open the site, you will navigate something and you try to buy any product, and you will confirm order. After that, you can go to the experience profile, navigate to the user at his contact. I'm sorry, and there you will see new tab in experience profile like e-commerce. Here there are a lot of information about contact, about his purchase, any cards, how many cards he has, how many orders he has, can just configure this, Score just configure this class. We can and created three conditions. So at this point, we will just check in if customer didn't do anything with his card. So maybe he added something to the card. After that, he switch close the browser and he did another stuff. Yes, but in 2 hours we will check it. So was anything changed? If card was not updated, so we will check the card state. So if card is not empty, so we go into this state and we will check. In this step, I don't remember what we do. So here we are checking if card was abandoned. So all this process describing situation when user added to cart something and not purchase something, and in 2 hours we will send him send email like, hey, you added to cart, so we are waiting for you to continue your order. Also, product catalog was moved right to site level because was few problems led to that different users which are non-admin can see products which they shouldn't see, and in this case better to keep it right on site level. The new version, Sitecore, also provides new tool like a commerce data migration tool. You can migrate right now catalogs and inventory sets from Sitecore Commerce 8.1 version. Unfortunately, I added this note that doesn't this migration tool doesn't support Sitecore Commerce 8.1. I don't know really why, but so I think some problems was there. So what does this tool can do? So it's just a .NET Core application which you can run on PowerShell. First of all, what you need to do, you need to export your catalogs right from Sitecore Commerce Server. Also, Sitecore has configured like a mapping configuration when you can map which field from Commerce Server need to map to another field on Sitecore Commerce site. After that, this tool will generate a zip file with, which will contain JSON files, and you can easily import this output catalog to Sitecore. and without timeouts, we have on site, we try to call any page, and at the same time we try to add products to the cart. And in the same time, maximum account of user was 2,800. So it's not too much. But for now, I don't have any information. Maybe when my project will finish, so we will try to run tests again and check. Any questions?
Have you had a chance to automate the process of updating the commerce part? So I mean mostly about plugins and installation and stuff like that, like CI/CD tools.
No, I didn't. But what can I say? I think already I know about 10 guys in the world from Sitecore community. Already installed it, already scaled it, but they didn't share anything. And I already asked them, but they say that okay, we will just maybe like any blog post, just about information, but they will not share. For now, they will not share. Maybe they're afraid that cameras will say that, oh guys, you configured it in correct way. So maybe because of this. But theoretically, I don't know, better to spend some time to find all the scripts which Sitecore Commerce uses and just split to parts, detect some which part of script installs each of 4 commerce rows and set up them separately. But also, I also want to just try to install like a standalone on premise, and after that, just change configuration, change some connection strings, and other stuff. And I want to check how will it work. Any other questions? Yes.
What about .NET Core and OIN? Can you please share your experience? I see that your final project was with .NET Core. Is it much faster than previous system web integration project? For instance, recycling doesn't take much faster now.
Really, it's difficult. It's difficult to say. So because when we start our project on 821, right, which was also how a part of functionality was based on ASP.NET Core, and another part was in Commerce Server. And Sitecore just provided documentation how we can start it on one standalone environment, right? And when we in the end of the project, we had some performance issue, and then we again asked Sitecore. They said, "Oh guys, yeah, I'm sorry, we need to scale it because as we can see, there are a lot of problems with it. So please follow our instructions how you can speed up it." And so, but on this point, I think we didn't have any chance to do that, because clients he need to pay some money for some servers, some configurations, which will also takes time. And about Sitecore 9,